Hey,
Hello,
Tracy.
everyone.
Hey, Tracy.
Hi, Tracy.
Hello.
It looks so good on you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
So are
Hey,
y'all going to
Jason.
be there at that meeting at 8 o'clock tomorrow, or what time are you going? I know y'all are
Thursday
going in
morning.
person, right?
Thursday morning,
Or Thursday morning, yeah. 8 o'clock?
8 a.m.
Okay. I just didn't know when I should do the virtual thing.
You're being virtual. They've moved the meeting location, but that won't affect you.
Right, okay.
So Tracy, if you want to, I can send you this agenda they have again, just so you have it. I'll send it out to everybody. I think I sent it out about a week ago, but I'm sure it can get lost in all the other emails that are received.
Well, I knew what time you were speaking. I just didn't know, yeah, what was going on before that. So,
Okay, see if I can locate that real quick before the meeting begins, and I'll go ahead and send
Oh,
that
it's
out to everybody.
no hurry.
Well, while it's fresh on the mind.
Okay.
Hey, Jason.
Hello.
How are you?
Good evening, Jason.
Ready? Hi, everybody.
Hey, Pedro.
Hey,
Good
Joe.
evening.
Hey, Joe. Hey, Jason.
Hello.
Hey, Brenda.
Good
Hey,
evening,
Brenda.
Okay, that agenda's just been sent to everybody again.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, it is 6:30. Looks like everybody is on the screen. Welcome everybody again to the Town of Waxhaw Board of Commissioners meeting, regular meeting, which is virtual, March 9th, 2021. And so before we get going, I'm going to have the town clerk read a statement into the record, please. Town clerk, it's yours.
Thank you, Mayor. So good evening. I just wanted to go over a couple logistics with regards to this meeting. For those participants who may not be very familiar with these types of meetings, please make sure to keep your camera on while the meeting is in progress and to mute yourselves when you are not talking. With regards to how the board members are going to participate in this meeting, the mayor will call on each of you individually to provide comments and votes. When voting, please remember to identify yourselves by stating your name and your vote. If you would like to speak at any point during the meeting, please raise your hand and be mindful of your background. If we are in the middle of a presentation and you are raising your hand but not being called on, please feel free to speak up. Most importantly, we want to make sure that all the board members are able to participate in this meeting fully, so please text me if you experience any technical difficulties. Next, we need to call the roll call. Please indicate if you are present. Mayor Ronald Pappas,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Brenda McMillan,
Present.
Commissioner Pedro Mori,
Present.
Commissioner Jason Hall,
Present.
Commissioner Ann Simpson,
Present.
Commissioner Tracy Weslick.
Present.
Thank you. All members are present. Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you.
Very good. Appreciate that. Thank you, everyone. At this point, we'll call this meeting to order. And if you would join me in the ceremonial opening, pledge allegiance to the flag. And if you would remain standing for a moment of silence shortly after. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Very good. Thank you for that. Appreciate that again. All right, at this time, we're going to look at the adoption of the agenda. Any requested changes to the consent agenda? Oh, actually, I'm sorry. I misspoke, but I saw your hand up. Okay, adoption of the agenda. So you have a request?
Yes, I would like to move the meeting minutes from January 26th down into new business.
Very good. So we're going to take item C1 on the consent agenda and move it down to new business. Is that correct?
Correct.
Very good. All right, with that, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the agenda as amended. So may I have a motion, please?
Moved.
Motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Great, thank you very much on that. So we have a roll call vote. We'll go around the horn on this. So we'll go to Mayor Pro Tem McMillan,
Brenda McMillan, aye.
Commissioner Morey,
Commissioner Mori, aye.
Commissioner Hall,
Commissioner Hall, aye.
Commissioner Simpson,
Commissioner Simpson, aye.
Commissioner West.
Commissioner Weslick, aye.
Very good. All right, the agenda is amended as stated. And so at this time, we have a couple of public comments pertaining to items on the agenda. So I'm going to turn it back over to the town clerk.
Actually,
I do a roll call. Wait, go ahead.
yeah, so those comments were related to the public hearing. We'll read those then. We don't have any items or comments related to the agenda.
Items on the agenda, my mistake. Public comment, you're going to take it down to I?
That's correct.
Okay. Those are general in nature
Mm-mm.
on I, correct?
Well, they're specific to the LDC.
Okay,
Mhm.
so we're gonna,
Be read under public hearings.
I know, but all right, so we'll go to that. All right, so now we'll move down to, again, approve the consent agenda as amended. I guess we have to go back to that and do a roll call vote on this, on the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Great. Once again, we'll go around the horn, make a roll call vote. Mayor Pro Tem McMillan,
Brenda McMillan, aye.
Commissioner Morey,
Commissioner Morey, aye.
Commissioner Hall,
Commissioner Hall, aye.
Commissioner Simpson,
Commissioner Simpson, aye.
Commissioner Westlick.
Commissioner Westlick, aye.
Good, thank you. Okay, so the consent agenda is approved all the way through. So we'll move down now to recognitions. So the first item on recognition is introduction of Waxhaw's newest employee. And we're going to have a presenter is Dina Sabinski. So our Director of Parks and Rec. Dina, I see you showing up on the camera. So floor is yours whenever you're ready.
Good evening, everyone. All right. Nick, Matt. Okay. Give me 1 minute and I will share my screen. All right, can everyone see my screen now?
Yes.
That's awesome. Thank you. All righty, so we've got some awesome news to talk about. We've got a new employee and a existing employee going on a new adventure. Miss Riley joined us a couple weeks ago, and she is our new weekend assistant with helping clean the parks, making sure all of our bathrooms are nice and shiny, and just keeping a general eye on all of our recreational areas and helping out with our downtown. Because as we know, we have a very vibrant downtown, and when we have wonderful days, we have lots of trash. So we making sure that we're keeping everything tidy at downtown as well. So I wanted to give a shout out to Miss Riley. You'll be seeing her out and about on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And sometimes she'll be helping us out also with special events. And she is a graduate of UNC Wilmington with her background is in recreation. So it's very cool. She understands the language and she understands the mission of making our community. So we're extremely happy to have her. And like I said, when you see her out and about, please say hello. Miss Amy is, as you know, she's been with the town for a little over 5 years now, and she's gone through different types of transitions, and she is going on a new adventure with our park side of the Park and Rec. So she is joining, actually, yesterday was her first day on the park side. So she's transitioning out from being the program coordinator to a park technician. And so she's going to have more hands-on on the park side. So she expressed it wanting to try out this adventure on figuring out the outside and the workings of our facilities. And we're so happy to have her in that role. She's going to help with coordination of getting all of our facilities kind of on a schedule. So I'm excited about that because I'm a big planner when it comes to our facilities. So I just wanted to give out a wonderful shout out to Miss Amy. And as you see her out and about, just congratulate her on her new role and wish her good luck on her new adventure. And that's my 2 staff changes or updates this week. You have any questions?
Any questions for Miss Dina all the way around? Congratulations to those. that are-
Congratulations.
Yeah, Amy going forward and new employee Riley. So you're building your team. That's great.
Well, we're rocking it out. Ready to go.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Next is, I guess we're going to have Miss Susan on that, a recognition of a building inspection staff and employee. So I'm going to let her pick up on that. Hopefully she'll sign on soon. There you go. We see you coming. Susan, are you ready? Somebody needs to let her in.
No, she's there.
Yes, she's in. There you go. All right, unmute yourself. There you go.
Oh, it's just me.
All right, how about now?
There you go. We hear you loud and clear.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I am Susan Lee, the permitting office manager here for the town. And I just wanted to give also a special shout out of recognition to one of my permitting techs, Lauren LaFond. She's been with the town now, just celebrated her 2-year anniversary in February. Came to us previously as a 911 operator for Rock Hill for a few years. And prior to that, spent over 20 years in Florida, her home state, with the the police department of Davie County and records management. So she's been a great fit since she came on board with the team with that background and received a ton of accolades during her 20-year tenure with Davie County. And now she continues with the town as well. She was working with a new contractor that pulled permits for the first time with the town last week. And this woman, also by the name of Susan, with a foundation doctor out of Charlotte, was so impressed with Lauren's customer service that she sent an email to Mayor Pappas. And I have the privilege of reading that correspondence right now. And she starts, Mayor Pappas, I'm the business manager for a foundation business in Charlotte, and surprisingly have not ever had to pull a permit within your city limits before, despite having pulled approximately 500 permits per year. I have just started the process with Lauren LaFond in your permitting department, and I'm so taken aback by your efficient automated process, which actually communicates the status, and just as surprised that your staff is so pleasantly helpful. I will say that this is something we pride ourselves on, and we all try to treat every single person that we deal with like we want to be treated. So Lauren, I know you're on the call there somewhere, so kudos. I know it's early, but dealing with the surrounding counties, I feel like my experience with each has provided a pretty clear snapshot, and I can say that you stand above your peers with your efficient and convenient process to pull a permit, and your staffing is actually communicative and willing to be helpful, which is not, and that's capitalized, the norm with other counties. Although I am not your constituent or a Waxhaw taxpayer, well done, sir. And Lauren's joined me on the call right there. She's been working remote several months. So to be honest, this is the first time I've seen her since I think Christmas. So we talk on the phone daily. So it's nice to see her in person. And Lauren, kudos. You know how much I appreciate everything you and Deborah, the other permit tech, do. Just to throw out some numbers, I had to pull these for a county report the other day. So Lauren's not aware of this either. But between these two ladies, and I help when I can, we issued over 3,600 individual permits during 2020. We also processed through phone calls and email requests over 12,700 inspection requests. Phenomenal year. It was amazing. This also doesn't include Lauren and Deborah back me up on the switchboard and take the overflow calls. And now April, our part-timer, is helping us with that. So I can't say enough. These ladies do a phenomenal job. A lot of it's behind the scenes. But if you see it being built in Waxhaw, whether it be a pool, which Lauren personally oversaw most of that last year, usually 30 pools a year. Last year, we did about 130. So you can understand with everybody being home, our numbers just increase exponentially. But kudos to Lauren, kudos to the entire team. And she just exemplifies everything we want in our Waxhaw family. And I couldn't be prouder to have her be a member of my team.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all the nice things.
Well deserved.
Thank you.
I was going to say, it's really nice to get those letters every so often, and again, congratulations on that recognition, because when the letter came to me, I was kind of thinking, oh, well, we're going to deal with this one, but it was a very nice letter. Very specific. So it's nice to hear. And Susan, you got a great team going on there, and all of this reflects on all of you. So thank you very much for helping us be who we are.
Thank you all. We appreciated the opportunity tonight. Aw, thank you.
We do that here, so that's great. All right. Well, any other comments, thoughts, whatever, before we move on? We'll move on to presentation, seeing none there. So we have a Juneteenth Independence Day recognition. I'm going to turn the floor over to Mayor Pro Tem McMillan. Brenda, the floor is yours.
Okay. Good evening, all. Can you hear me? No, can you hear me? What's wrong with me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Oh, nobody's saying anything.
We're all muted.
Okay, I'm not used to speaking, but all right. Good evening. Let me begin. As a member of the Board of Commissioners for the town of Waxhaw, it is my duty and responsibility to represent all the people. But there is a population or segment of the population that at times feels that they are underrepresented and underserved. As Waxhaw has grown to a population of approximately 20,000, we are more of a melting pot with an increasing number of people of African American, Hispanic, Asian, Indian, and other ethnicities and cultures. As commissioner, I have been advocating for that diversification to have a better reflection of diversity represented in our town staff, police department, and in other areas. Juneteenth, or June 19th, is a significant day to a segment of our population. As with any other issue or idea which is presented to me by citizens or other municipalities, I believe it is responsible for me to bring it forward to the board as a whole, as I am with this request. I was contacted by neighboring municipalities who inquired if Waxhaw would be moving forward with a Juneteenth resolution. I then brought this information to the board in our 2x2 meeting in January. It is now being brought forth tonight for additional information, and I believe it will be scheduled again at an upcoming 2x2 meeting for additional questions or discussions. Our surrounding municipalities of Monroe, Stallings, Mineral Springs, Indian Trail, as well as the North Carolina League of Cities, have all put forth resolutions for this day. Juneteenth, or June 19th, is a day which commemorates the ending of slavery in the United States on June 19, 1865. It was announced the Civil War had ended and the slaves had been freed. Juneteenth is observed as a ceremonial holiday in 47 states, including North Carolina, and has been an official state holiday in Texas since 1980. The Senate in 2018 unanimously passed a simple resolution in honor of the day. Observance of that day is marked in various ways. I have attended programs on the day which have included a prayer breakfast as well as multicultural events and programs. In Charlotte, they have had street fairs or events with cultural foods, musical programs, art exhibits, vendors, readings, poetry, teaching, and information about African American heritage. It is an opportunity to share with each other, learn more about our past, and grow with understanding for all. We should welcome the rich diversity of cultures that make up our society and our town. That diversity gives us much to celebrate. I will read to you right now an example of the resolution put forth by Indian Trail, and then Mayor Alvarez will be on to speak briefly regarding Indian Trail's resolution and why they felt it was important to bring that forth. It reads as follows. A resolution designating Juneteenth Independence Day in recognition of June 19, 1865, the date on which news of the end of slavery reached the slaves in the southwestern states. Whereas news of the end of slavery did not reach the frontier areas of the United States in particular the state of Texas and other southwestern states until months after the conclusion of the Civil War, more than 2.5 years after President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863. Whereas on June 19, 1865, Union soldiers led by Major General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas, with news that the Civil War had ended and the enslaved were free. Whereas African Americans who had been slaves in the Southwest celebrated June 19, commonly known as Juneteenth Independence Day, as inspiration and encouragement for future generations. Whereas African Americans from the Southwest have continued the tradition of observing Juneteenth Independence Day for more than 150 years. Whereas Juneteenth Independence Day began as a holiday in the state of Texas and is now celebrated in 46 states in the District of Columbia as a special day of observance and recognition of the emancipation of all slaves in the United States. Whereas Juneteenth Independence Day celebrations have been held to honor African American freedom while encouraging self-development and respect for all cultures. Whereas the faith and strength of character demonstrated by former slaves and the descendants of former slaves remain an example for all people of the United States, regardless of background, religion, or race. Whereas slavery was not officially abolished until the ratification of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States in December 1865. Whereas over the course of history in the United States has grown into a symbol of democracy and freedom around the world. Therefore, be it that Mayor Alvarez and the Town Council of Indian Trail, 1, designates June 19th as Juneteenth Independence Day. 2, recognizes the historical significance of Juneteenth Independence Day to the United States and designates June 19 as an annual paid municipal holiday, honoring the paid holiday on Monday when June 19th falls on a Saturday or Sunday for employees of the town of Indian Trail. 3, supports the continued nationwide celebration of Juneteenth Independence Day to provide an opportunity for the people of the United States to learn more about the past and better understand and acknowledge the experiences that have shaped the United States. And 4, recognizes that the observance of the end of slavery is part of the history and heritage of the United States. Witness my hand and seal of the town of Indian Trail on the 12th day of January, 2021, Michael L. Alvarez, Mayor. Mayor Alvarez, are you on the line?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, yes, then I am. I've actually did this correctly.
Okay, thank you for taking time to speak to us this evening.
Oh, no, thank you for having me here. I wanted to say I wouldn't be here tonight if it wasn't for Councilman Franco McGee of Monroe, who first presented this to Monroe, who overwhelmingly supported it. And I'm honored to be here tonight to speak on this resolution and the importance of it. We in Indian Trail passed this resolution for several reasons. One is this acknowledges the travesties of the past and takes a very small step forward in helping to understand that, to acknowledge and understand what we did wrong in our past. Because we all know those that don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. Two, it celebrates a day that our nation did take another step forward towards being that shining city on the hill, towards truly being what our Declaration stands for, the inalienable right for all to be free. That was given to us upon God, not a government. And if you haven't noticed, there's quite the divide in this nation. There's people that are still crying, and their voices are getting drowned out by politics. They're getting drowned out by even more divide. And they just want to be heard. They want to be acknowledged. They want the ability for us to hear them and to understand that we have not reached that point yet in this nation. And we need to get there. If just one voice doesn't feel equal, then our Declaration stands for nothing. Our Constitution stands for nothing. And I'm honored to be the one chosen to speak here tonight on this. It touches my heart. It's very important. And I would be equally honored and humbled if the town of Waxhaw would join on to this resolution and make it a paid municipal holiday for the town of Waxhaw, and join with the other towns and join with Monroe and Indian Trail in our Parks and Recs departments and having celebrations every year on Juneteenth to further educate, to further take steps forward, to have North Carolina and Union County raise the bar and set the example so that one day Juneteenth will be acknowledged as a paid holiday throughout the United States of America. And we can be proud to know that we live here once again. Thank you.
Thank you again, Mayor Alvarez, for taking the time to speak with us. We know that you have another meeting that you do have to go over to, but we appreciate you being with us on line this evening. Thank you.
I'm great. I'm honored, and it's nice to see everyone, and everyone have a blessed evening.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor Alvarez, for bringing that to our attention. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too, even though it's from a tiny little TV screen. Now I got to get back to being the mayor of Indian Trail into my council meeting. So I'll just put this device down and pick the other one up. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, for orchestrating all that and facilitating for Mayor Alvarez. Very heartwarming to hear. So thank you for that. All right, something we haven't done in a long time is a public hearing. Needless to say, we'll figure this out. But on this, I'm going to need a motion to open the public hearing. First time in a long time.
So moved.
Very good. So Mayor Pro Tem made a motion for the opening of the public hearing. Roll call vote as we go around the horn. Commissioner Simpson.
Commissioner Simpson, aye.
Commissioner Morey.
Commissioner Morey, aye.
Commissioner Hall.
Commissioner Hall, aye.
Commissioner Westlake.
Commissioner Westlake, aye.
Back to Mayor Pro Tem.
Brenda McMillan, aye.
Very good. We are open on the public hearing, and I'm going to turn this immediately over to our town manager, Jeffrey Wells. Jeff, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. And indeed, it has been a while for a public hearing. So let me see, are we seeing the full screen of our presentation?
Yes.
Seen here.
Okay, great. So Waxhaw is facing increased growth challenges, we've greatly increased demand for services and infrastructure from our residents and businesses. We know growth has and will continue to be an issue that we, as a municipality, need to get out ahead of. We get out in front by creating a strategy that recognizes the growth is here, puts us in position to manage it. And with great support from this Board of Commissioners, planning staff feels that we have developed a growth strategy that will guide our vision for diversification of our tax base, more walkability and street connectivity to relieve traffic congestion, more local jobs and commerce, and continued investment in our safe, friendly, and vibrant downtown. And those are just a few of the key points among many others as we've gone now over a year and a half and going on 2 years into this process that I am very proud to start this evening to discuss. I will bring home the end of the presentation as well with your two senior planners, both Blair Israel and Madison Miller, taking some of the slides in the middle part of the presentation. But we just want to walk through the process and how we've gotten to the point where we are this evening, and then have just a few little minor outstanding issues also to discuss at the end of the presentation as well. And then just as a reminder, whenever we do close the public hearing as well, that the public comment period by state law does stay open for 24 hours after the close of the public hearing. So with that, just want to again reiterate where we are in this process. As I said a moment ago, we started this process actually back in the summer of 2019, did a lot of initial work there through the end of the year, then got the green light from this board at the January 2020 retreat to continue on with our process. And as I say, we greatly appreciate that support through this. You see this slide here that pretty much has taken us through the home stretch where we had planning board's initial final review of this document and maps at their meeting in January. Of course, we had our BOC retreat in January, late January as well. In early February, we did our final revisions to the document based on those two meetings. The planning board voted unanimously to recommend the document on February 15th. Here we are this evening for the public hearing, and then hopeful to have in 2 weeks the official final decision. So why are we doing this? As I mentioned, we are growing, and this slide actually comes from Union County. This comes straight from their 2050 comprehensive plan. And as you can see here, that 30 years from now, if things go forward the way they are now, the expectation is that we could be up close to 400,000 residents in the county alone. Why is that? Because Charlotte, the Charlotte region in general, the 14 county metro area is one of the fastest growing in the country. So where do we fit in on that? This is actually from 2018. So, and as Brenda McMillan said not too long ago, we actually anticipate that our 2020 number will be around 20,000 residents, which would represent 100% change in population from 2010. We can't really use those official numbers yet, though, until we get them. So we still use the 2018 number for now, but we feel pretty confident that we are going to be close, if not over 20,000 people here in Waxhaw whenever we do finally receive those numbers. So with that, I am going to let Blair come in now and talk to you about our public input process and how we determined our growth strategy moving forward, and walk through that part of the process. And Blair, you can just tell me when to change slides.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. And I apologize, my camera doesn't seem to be working, but hopefully you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, well, we want to focus on the presentation anyway. So let me start by just giving you just a review of all the public input that we've been able to gather. This has been a very public input driven process. It seems like a long time ago, the first two open houses that we had back in September and October of 2019 were pre-COVID, so we actually were able to meet and mingle. And we think that made for 2 very successful meetings that I'll go into detail about. But then the next year, in September and October of 2020, even though we did have COVID conditions, obviously, we met outside and were able to get a fair number of people there. You can see it didn't quite match the numbers of the first batch, where we had 55 at open house 1, 39. It dropped down to 25 and 11, but we feel that, well, we did make up for that with just the information that we were also able to get, the input that we could get through our online surveys. And 2 of them are listed here below. Survey 1 that ran from September 18th to October 25th. We had 132 responses there, and those were not just quick little responses. There's quite a lot of information that we asked for and received in most of those responses. And in survey 2, we had 275 responses. But that was, what's not listed there is the fact that we had, when we posted the growth strategy documents, such as the land development code and the future land use plan and the rezoning map, pre-zoning map, that was open, that page was available, and there was opportunity there to just click and give input. And we received quite a lot of input that way. So we've had public input all throughout the process, and I would say it was very productive, and I think you'll see why in the next slide. Go ahead, Jeff. The method that we used, I think, was really led a lot to the success. First of all, we promoted it both through online and in print, usual suspects, but we were able to get the word out pretty well. And this was back when, for the first two open houses, when Waxhaw owned the Niven Price building, so we hosted them there. And the third and fourth we had at the Charles McGee shelter. So that was nice and open and a very big space, and lots of posts where we could pin up all our boards and such. I think what really made it a success was the type of format that we used, where people could walk in anytime they wanted to, and we had it for like a two-hour period. People could come at any point. They walk in, they're instantly greeted by our staff, and they can walk through at their own pace through the different stations that we had. We had about 4 or 5 stations in each setting, and these were self-guided, but we had planning staff there and others from both the town hall and also elected officials there, some of yourselves included, to talk about these issues, to ask questions, to get any explanation that they might need. And also it gave them a chance to just voice their concerns directly. A lot of times people just want to come and be heard, but these meetings went well beyond that, because they were able to learn a lot of information through the different media that we use, visual displays, surveys, interactive maps and such. They learned a lot while they were there, and they had different formats to give their feedback, whether it was sitting down to take a survey or putting dots on the wall or whatever there was, or writing in things on maps. We got their opinions in lots of ways. So let me just give you a little bit more information about the different open houses. Open house 1, the whole theme was live, work, shop, and play. In other words, we asked for information and wanted people to think in terms of where do they live, where do they work, where do they usually go shopping, and where do they go for recreation and just their free time. So we asked, what did they want in Waxhaw in these 4 categories, where they did those things now. And that was an interesting map. So many people, of course, put dots on the map saying we live in Waxhaw, but then we had arrows pointing off the map for where they worked. And there were a lot of dots that were on those arrows pointing off out of Waxhaw. But then finally we asked, well, for these things that you want, where would you want them? And so we gave people opportunities to take pins, put them on the map to signify this is where I would want to work, or this is where I would want to shop, or this is where I think there should be those types of uses and experience. So with Open House 2, we had a lot of results to show the public from our first open house. And so that was kind of the focus, is like, this is what we've heard you say so far, both from the first open house and also from the online surveys. And we were able to get their reaction from there and go further and build out these ideas a little bit more that we're starting to develop. With Open House 3 and 4, you got to remember that there was about a year almost in between Open House 2 and Open House 3, nearly a year. And we had developed a lot of ideas since then, again, being informed continually with online input and through meetings that we had in the meantime with the board, planning board and such. And so the ideas developed for the land development code, a future land use map, and also a pre-zoning map. And so in Open House 3 and 4, which were pretty much the same meeting, we just had 2 opportunities for people to come. We got reaction from people and feedback on these ideas and on the maps, on the codes, and also some other issues that were kind of hot and we wanted to get particular input on, such as cottages and apartments and such. So let's move on to the next slide. After all this, and really all through this, the issues came to bear, and they were kind of obvious, and no big surprises. There were a number of issues that were identified, but the top 4 were really about transportation, traffic congestion in particular, those issues, and commuting, the local character of the town and what the character of downtown is like in particular, but Waxall overall. A third issue, though, was about economic development. There was a lot of concern about opportunities for more choices, again, for shopping and especially for working in Waxhaw. And finally, one of the big issues that we saw again and again was about walkability in general. And by this, we mean both having connections through bicycling, through walking, having those connections, having that connectivity, but also it being safe. So there's a lot of concern about that. These were the 4 themes that really rose to the surface of all our public input. So I'd like to move on to the next slide and just give you sort of a where we were in the calendar. By this time, it was the beginning of the year 2020. And so we had a lot to report to the board for their retreat. And so what the board heard was all the input that we received, sort of a condensed version, of course, but then how the land development code and future land use map and pre-zoning concepts were coming around, that were being established. And what we wanted from them and what they wanted from us is to, a comfort level with that and to see, are we on the right track? Because we were definitely moving ahead with some ideas that had formulated through this whole process. And we needed the board's approval for, whether that was a direction we should go for the town in planning, or whether we needed to do something different or how it needed to change. So that was one of our goals. And then the other 3 have to do with our relationship to the county, because what we wanted to do is, or what we need to do is work with the county, particularly in our town that has so many donut holes, or even had more at that time, and then gap areas. You can see on this map over here, the yellow are donut holes, which are county property that's completely surrounded by Waxall municipality. And so those are areas that we definitely want to work with the county on. But then the green as well, even though they're not completely surrounded by county property, they are largely contained within the town of Waxhaw. And so what goes on in these properties is of great import to the town and great opportunities for the town. And so the interaction there needs to be one of cooperation with the county. So we wanted to make a formal request to the county for working with them on the donut holes in yellow and the gap areas in green. And then finally, just to formalize this, we asked for permission to do this, show a joint planning area on the future land use map. And that joint planning area was simply the green plus the yellow combined. these were areas that we would work with the county on, and we would have understanding from the county that they would work with us. So anyway, we feel that retreat was a great success. And I think that we were very happy with how the board received it. And so we had the green light to move on. So let's go to the next slide. Now, I want to just remind you of those key themes: transportation, local character, economic development, and walkability. These four things are particular issues, but they're very much connected. The solution to them, or the working on those issues, takes a strategy that's going to address them all. They're interrelated. And so we felt that the strategy that we put together needed to be interrelated as well. And so what that came to look like were the Waxhaw development zones. Speaking in the past tense, but that's what they are, the Waxall development zones. And the three here that are described are the downtown economic center, the employment center, and the neighborhood center. Just very quickly, the downtown center is what you might expect. It focuses on the historic downtown, and you're going to see a map that shows where all these are laid out in a minute, but I just want to describe them. So that economic center in the downtown is really composed of a mix of uses, retail, office, and even light manufacturing uses, and also a range of housing choices that would be available. The employment centers is a whole different thing. These are outside of the downtown. These are in areas where there is large underdeveloped parcels, and also ones that are connected or easily reached by existing or future transportation routes. I'm speaking of Highway 75, 16, and the East and West connector in Waxhaw. But the employment center would be a place to focus efforts to gather interest from those who would want to develop larger employment centers. In other words, employers that would be of various types, and we'll go into that. But it would be that, and also some housing opportunities for those who work there or anyone. We'll give you more details about that, but just finally, the neighborhood centers, these are focused on individual intersections that are usually surrounded by residential areas, but these would be compact neighborhood centers, which would have a mix of uses. That could be ideally places that people would want to walk to take advantage of from where they live. So this looks particularly at walkability and just more opportunities for people to do things without having to just go to downtown or just to the commercial centers along Highway 16. So let's move on. So just to sort of recap on what all is involved in the growth strategy. When we talk about economic development, we are of course including commercial development, but even more so, opportunities for, and when we talk about these employment centers, places for research and development, high-tech manufacturing, corporate parks. This is the kind of businesses that we would like to attract. And so we're trying to create through the tools that we have, particularly zoning, but also the land that we've set aside, or we're setting aside through zoning, and to attract these types of things. By job creation, just again, more opportunities to not only live here, but work here. And you can see, ideally the kinds of jobs that we would want to attract. And this gets back to the idea of having a balance of residential growth, residential land uses, and commercial and industrial land uses, where you can diversify the tax base, which is more sustainable all in all. But not only diversifying the tax base, but also giving more opportunities for a variety of housing types. That's another important idea within the growth strategy. And again, you can see here the joint planning areas that I discussed earlier. So let's move on to the next slide and talking about some of the things that we'll find in the land development code. What makes the Land Development Code unique? Well, as you know, the Land Development Code would replace our current UDO, or Unified Development Ordinance. And we feel it's a far more efficient and easy to use document, far more clear. It simplifies the overall UDO. There's more of it's easier to use. There are fewer chapters, there are fewer zoning districts. Things are simplified, and you'll see more of that as we look at the maps. Another thing that this code allows us to do is make direct links to other plans, other documents that have to do with transportation or Parks and Rec. It's a much more efficient way to reference those documents. And this is really all from the changes, or what we're doing partly is responding to changes that have happened at the state level. And so that's what we mean by consistent with 160D. That is state legislation, a new statute that is the effective date has been put off a bit just because of COVID and such, but it was definitely a time for us to redo our development code to make it in compliance with 160D. And so some of the things that'll include is that there'll be no more conditional use zoning districts or permits. And then also when talking about signage, we had to update the signage language to comply with 160D. We'll go into a little more information about that. And as you'll see in a moment, a new zoning map that was necessitated by all this for two reasons. One was in order to create the development zones that we were talking about. So that requires changing some of the zoning in order to set the stage for those development zones. But another reason is just because we have simplified the zoning code from 17 base zones to 8. And let's go to the next slide and you'll see what I mean. You can see the way this diagram is set up. There's two current columns and two proposed columns. When you add up all the current zoning districts that we have, it's 17 base districts. But what we found is, as we were trying to simplify, trying to make a more sensible document that was more straightforward, we found that all those zoning districts were not really necessary. And so we were able to combine some of them with residential from 4 to 3. From mixed use zoning, there were quite a number of different mixed use districts that really boiled down to what we were calling neighborhood center. And you'll see more about that as we go along. For commercial zoning, we have under the UDO, 4 different commercial districts. That's been reduced to just corridor commercial. With industrial zoning, 2 industrial become employment center. The only one that didn't really change as far as the number of districts was downtown zoning. We still have Main Street and Town Center. So, but this means we have 8 new districts and then also a conditional mixed use district. And so let's move on to the next slide. And Madison, I think, can take it from here in talking about the actual contents of the Land Development Code. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Blair. And unfortunately, my camera is working, so you will have to see me throughout this whole presentation. But so here we have our Land Development Code structure. As Blair kind of alluded to, our Unified Development Ordinance currently has 21 chapters. And you can see here we have condensed that down to now 13 chapters. Next slide. So chapter 1, so I will go through each individual chapter, kind of giving a summary and what this chapter establishes. So chapter 1, this establishes the authority and purpose of regulating planning and zoning within the town through our Land Development Code. And so through 160D, this creates links to current and future plans. It will eventually repeal the UDO, giving the LDC full force by August 1st of this year. And then it describes vesting rights, the time periods for those, and then also permit choice. Next slide, thanks. So chapter 2 describes the roles of various town staff, the Board of Commissioners, and all of our advisory boards. So this goes into detail what the zoning administrator does, floodplain administrator, the building inspector, public services director, and then the town engineer, while outlining all of the powers and duties of the Board of Commissioners and the advisory boards. Next slide. Chapter 3, the purpose of this chapter is to kind of establish the administration and enforcement procedures of this code. And so it defines the various decision types, either administrative, legislative, or quasi-judicial, and then the review processes and method of enforcement. So it better outlines the processes that the planning department and also other departments go through to help readers and viewers of this document understand all of our processes. Next slide. And chapter 4 is one of our bigger chapters. So the 8 base zoning districts and the 1 conditional zoning district that Blair mentioned is all defined in this chapter, and it outlines all of their dimensional standards. It also establishes our overlay districts. So our corridor overlay district on Highway 16 and Waxall Marvin Road, and then also our manufactured home overlay district. So it also outlines general use regulations. It houses our table of uses, including accessory and temporary uses. And then for particular uses, it talks about special requirements for those uses. Next slide. And I believe as we do, we'll trade off for a second to Jeff to go over our future land use plan and our zoning map.
Thank you, Madison. Appreciate that. So this is the final product for our future land use plan. And as we have talked about, as I will point out, we have the downtown center, which is right here in this blue ring. In the orange rings, we have the employment centers. And you see we have 3 main areas for that, where you have your primary clusters of employment center zoning. And then you also see in various locations on the map, different clusters of neighborhood center, both east of downtown, west of downtown, 2 locations along 16, kind of midway through town, 1 on the very north end, and then 1 along Waxall Marvin Road near Millbridge. It is interesting to point out that these clusters aren't terribly different from what our existing future land use plan called for, but there were some little subtle differences. And so we're very proud of how this turned out. One thing I'll point out is that the purple parcels, everything that's zoned employment center, with the exception of the mill, which is the apartment complex here on the east side of downtown, and Ardmore on the north side of downtown, it represents 1,100 acres of land that would be zoned for employment center. So just want to point that out and point that out to everybody that's listening, that you know how serious we are as a town in really trying to diversify our tax base and open up that work part of the live, work, shop, and play that we've been talking about through this entire process. And so I know we've talked about this map and other things for a very long time, so I don't want to belabor all the little points of this, but also want to point out, you know, we still have an extensive corridor commercial area along Highway 16 that's centered along the intersection of Kensington and Cuthbertson Road, exactly where you would expect that corridor type development, as well as another area of that is just north of the downtown development center there. And as we talked about before, this pink, light purple area are areas that we are very interested in working with the county to joint plan, and we understand that we'll have more opportunity to talk with them about just that when they wrap up their 2050 comp planning process sometime in the summer. And they'll also, as we understand, consider our ETJ request that has been sitting out there at that time as well. But want to point out one of the most important things about this as I move on to the next slide is you see the zoning map, and I'll go back one more time to the future land use plan map. They both are consistent right out of the gate. What we did is what we call pre-zone. Through the whole town, we pre-zoned the areas for what we felt was appropriate for uses there. And what that means is that everybody right out of the gate here, every parcel owner will have some type of permitted use by right that they could do on their property. And as you know, in the table of permitted uses that we worked thoroughly through, there are still plenty of special use opportunities and conditional zoning opportunities depending on what the use is. But contrary to our current zoning that is still in place in our UDO, there is quite a number of properties that did not have any zoning entitlement, which we didn't feel was really the right way to be or very appropriate moving forward. So it was really important to us to have that opportunity for property owners, but also for this process to be consistent with what our future land use plan shows. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Madison.
Thank you, Jeff. So diving right back in, Chapter 5, Subdivision Regulations. This establishes all of the procedures and standards for subdivisions by outlining the review type, whether it be a major, minor, or exempt subdivision. It also outlines the final plat procedure and then checklists for review that can be done by staff or by others. And then finally, it provides the lot design standards for these lots that are created within the subdivision process. So it talks about the size, the shape, and then the orientation of the lot. Next slide. So our design standards, the design standards are intended to promote the development of buildings and structures, kind of in the manner that is consistent with the character of the town. So these standards will apply to development by different types, either civic, commercial, mixed use, multifamily, employment, and then we have some recommendations for residential types of development. And so you can go back. So some of the general architectural standards that this chapter houses includes the style and compatibility, the scale of the buildings, the siding and orientation, and then the pattern and repetition of those designs. Next slide. Chapter 7, kind of working in tandem with the town engineering manual, defines the types of streets and right-of-way required. It requires all developments to have curb, gutter, and sidewalk on both sides of the street, depending on the development. And it also promotes connectivity between adjoining properties or developments and throughout residential subdivisions, either by vehicle connectivity or pedestrian activity. And then the last portion of this chapter talks about the parking standards. So this outlines parking space and bicycle parking requirements for specific uses, but also defines additional parking alternatives to some of these standard requirements. Next slide. Chapter 8. So this chapter establishes some standards to try and preserve and enhance the natural environment and then some of the aesthetic feel of the town. And so it does this through landscaping, tree preservation, buffering, and then some additional lighting requirements. So for landscaping, there will be landscaping requirements for the front, side, and rear of the lot. And then of course, landscaping requirements for parking lots. We cover tree preservation as far as the preservation of tree canopies, the mitigation for new trees or replacement of new trees, and then also standards for preserving heritage trees. And then for buffering, there are different buffering types for either residential or commercial use. And then there are varying buffer classes depending on locations of these new developments. And finally, we outline standards for outdoor lighting. And so this is standards for commercial, mixed use, and residential developments. And then next slide, and I believe I'll be turning it back over to Blair to finish us out on our land development code structure.
Okay, thanks, Madison. There's just a few more chapters left. Although one of the largest in the whole LDC is Chapter 9, having to do with environmental standards. But we really didn't have to write that one. That's mostly state standards that we just had to incorporate into our local code. And they have to do with three subjects, really: post-construction stormwater, sedimentation and erosion control, and floodplain administration. So let's go on to the next chapter. This one takes, this one has a lot of content to it. When you're talking about signs, a lot of times town codes, this is perhaps the biggest section in their code. As you can see from the number of sections there, there's a lot of different issues when it comes to signs. Everything from just how big the signs can be, how they're measured, to how they're illuminated, and of course the whole permitting process for signs. But I just want to point out in particular that these are standards for both the erection of new signs, the alteration of existing signs, and the maintenance of signs. It also talks about all kinds of prohibited signs. And then also the regulation of where the sign is, its height, its size, the number of signs that you can have, etc. So a lot of rules about signs. And thankfully, Madison put this particular chapter together. There's a lot of detail to it. Let's move on to the next chapter, though. It's a very short one and it has to do with non-conforming situations. And by that, what we mean is that when zoning changes, as it's going to with the pre-zoning plan, that will mean that there will be some properties, and there's always some properties that do not meet that current code because the code changed, and not the property, the code changed. And this doesn't make that property and the uses on it illegal. It just means that they're non-conforming to one or more of the regulations that are in the code. And these can have anything to do with the lot size or how the lot's used or the structures in the lots. It can be non-conforming signs. It can be non-conforming manufactured homes, any kind of non-conforming features. So this covers all those details. And there's quite a lot, but it's a relatively short chapter. And so in the next chapter, chapter 12, also a short chapter having to do with historic preservation. A lot of this is straight from state code as well, as it deals with the designation of landmarks. And we have 4 historic landmarks in Waxhaw, also certificates of appropriateness. And so this has to do mostly with describing those and describing the procedure for designating those landmarks and issuing the certificate of appropriateness. And last but not least, our final chapter, definitions. And this can be one of the most important chapters because we found that we needed to put over 360 definitions in there just to make everything clear, and the way we're using words can be easily checked. So that's a chapter that is going to be used quite often. So a lot of care went into that. So that's it. That's a review of our land development code, and I'll turn it back to Jeff.
All right, thank you, Blair. So as I mentioned before, the planning board, their recommendation was to unanimously approve the land development code, the updated future land use map, and updated zoning map. They did this at their February 15th regular meeting. They did have one content addition that they wanted to make as part of that recommendation, and that had to do with the definition of a qualifying tree. And they recommended that be increased from 2-inch minimum caliper to a 4-inch minimum caliper or diameter at breast height, what's also referred to as DBH. And we can expound on that here in just a few moments and get some board comment on that. So discussion topics. So that is one of the discussion topics for us tonight. As I mentioned, a few little minor things that have popped up for us to potentially hash out. That's one. Food truck parking requirements is 2, and then trim lighting on commercial buildings would be 3. And then of course, any other things of interest that the board may want to discuss as well, but we will come back to that momentarily too. Your motion for tonight, just to remind you, would be to close the public hearing. And then again, the public comment can still be received for 24 hours after closure of the hearing. And then the requested motion for March 23rd would be a motion for approval of the new land development code, updated future land use and zoning maps as presented or amended, depending on the results of our discussion here momentarily. And I won't read this, but somebody will have to read this at our next meeting. Our proposed motion of reasonableness and consistency that would deal with the update to the zoning ordinance, update to the future land use map, as well as the zoning map. So this is the moment, I guess, where I want to gloat again, just how proud I am of everybody through this process. It has been an amazing process, an amazing experience. Y'all know I got choked up a little bit about it at the retreat. So far, I'm doing okay right now, but I just want to tell everybody how proud I am of all of our staff. And I also want to reiterate, this was not just our planning staff that was involved in this. Engineering had a big hand in it. Parks and Recreation had a big hand in it. Public Services had a big hand in it. People in this office don't even realize that they had some input on it. We would bat some things on to HR just to see, that really, don't have any interest or knowledge of planning and zoning, but just to see what their thoughts would be on something. So, I mean, it really was an entire group process, and it's just been an honor and a privilege. And I also want to say how much we greatly appreciate the advisory boards, the Board of Adjustment and the Planning Board for their support. But most importantly, I want to let the Board of Commissioners know just how much we appreciate your support through this process. You got a process that was driven by your staff. We wrote it in-house. We're able to complete a project that has had a couple of other starts in the past and just didn't happen. But I'm proud to say that here we are, and right here on the precipice of having a new document that I think will, as we've talked about, be a better document for us, allow us to be more sustainable as we are looking and have to understand that this growth is here and how we manage it. And I believe that this product does do that. And so with that, let's go back to these discussion topics, and I'll probably get out of this share screen and go into another share screen of the text of the code. But off the top, the minimum tree size for qualifying tree, and we actually have a very good reference on staff with Blair, as he is a registered landscape architect. And I'd like for Blair to come back on and talk about it as we debated this planning board recommendation, and to let you know as a board what our thoughts on that, just to help with your decision making on this one point. Blair?
Yes. Well, I would want to start out by just saying that we went with a 2-inch diameter for a qualifying tree. But let me explain what a qualifying tree is. This is a term that we use for when we say that a certain number of trees are required, or trees are required in certain areas, such as parking lots, where we have a requirement for a tree within 60 feet of every parking space. And there's a number of other requirements for trees, but we have to explain what we mean by that tree. It can't just be a little sapling that's put in. It has to meet certain requirements for how it's planted and its quality and its species and its size. And so that's why we have a qualifying tree. And so, in defining that qualifying tree, we chose 2 inches caliper. And you'll find that in most codes throughout the region and perhaps the country will say the same. Excuse me. They will say 2 inches diameter. And the reason for that is because it's kind of a good medium point between having a very, very small tree, which when you plant it tend to grow fast and tend to adapt to their new soil conditions very quickly. In other words, the smaller a tree you plant, the better its chances of survival and of really taking off and being a successful plant. The larger tree that you transplant, the greater risk you take in that tree surviving. Now, every tree is going to have, when you transplant it, is going to go into shock at first, and it's just going to sit there for a bit until it adjusts to its environment. And I don't know all the biology behind it, but it takes a little while for it to come out of shock and start really growing. For a 4-inch caliper tree, that period of time is much longer or significantly longer than it would be for a 2-inch. But that's not the only reason why we would prefer a 2-inch. When planting a 2-inch tree is fairly standard. Like I said, it's fairly easy to work with. They're largely available at nurseries. If you're going to require a 4-inch caliper tree, first of all, it's a lot harder to find those trees, and particularly if you have a variety of species that on your plan that you're trying to meet. So if we require 4-inch caliper trees, the developer might say, well, I know I can get maybe this kind of tree for that, but I can't get all these other trees that I wanted to use. So I'm just going to plant that one tree. And so you tend to end up with more of a monoculture in your plans. But also, even if the trees are available, the amount of care and expense it takes, not just to purchase the tree. Obviously, a larger tree costs a little more than a smaller tree. A 4-inch is more expensive than a 2-inch, but the expense really is in the care and in transporting and planting that tree in a way that tree is going to thrive. So a lot of times, the contractors aren't really equipped or to handle that large a tree. And so they'll just make do. And a lot of times there could be damage done to that tree in the process. So for reasons, I guess lastly, I want to point out, as I was talking about the shock that trees go into, what you'll find is that when you plant a 4-inch tree and a 2-inch tree, say that you plant them side by side and they're the same species, same condition, what you'll find is that 2-inch tree will start to grow at a quicker rate than that 4-inch. And in not too many years, it will catch up with that 4-inch caliper tree. That has been my experience over my years in the private sector and also in working with the public, or on the public side as a landscape architect, but also as I looked around and talked to others, particularly the Union County Cooperative Extension, they largely have the same experience and advice. There's a lot of articles written on the subject, but what it boils down to is that better chance of the tree surviving and thriving, and less expense all around. And I think just a more successful tree altogether. So that's my reasons for saying a 2-inch is better than a 4-inch in this case.
So let's pause there, I guess, and we'll take these one at a time. Do board members have any thoughts or comments on what Blair has just discussed?
Yeah, I'm going to echo what was just said. I am a North Carolina master gardener, and the root ball for a 4-inch caliper tree requires a lot more care after planting. And what happens is when builders put these trees in, the homeowners or whatever commercial property is, they don't know how to properly care for the tree once it's planted. Many times they're not even going to water them. And so there is a much better chance of survival on a smaller tree than one with a large root ball. And that would be my input.
Any other thoughts, questions?
Jeff, I agree. I'm fine with keeping it at the 2-inch instead of the 4-inch. I think 2-inch is the way to go for survivability and moving forward.
Okay, anybody else have a differing opinion?
Jeff, I just wanted to agree with the previous two statements.
Hey, Jeff, this is Commissioner Hall. I am not an arborist or master gardener, but the explanation from Blair I found was very thorough. And I guess I'm kind of curious where the idea came to move it from 2 to 4, since it seems like the 2-inch caliper has been there for a while. It's what many of the other municipalities use. Might as well just keep it the same.
It was a recommendation from one of the planning board members. It just came up the night of the meeting, and so that's where it came from.
I concur with my fellow board members. 2 inches agreeable based upon the explanation from Blair and the information from Commissioner Westlick.
Okay, for what it sounds like, then we will keep that as written at the 2-inch. So I'm going to go out of that and I am going to share a new screen to talk about our next two subjects. Which I think I have to go out of the slideshow first. And then back into the share screen. Here we are. So hopefully everybody sees the draft, and we took liberty to add a couple of pieces of content for you to chew on tonight, I guess you could say. And this is a follow-up to our additional discussion that we've had. The first is on food trucks. And so there's been a little bit of discussion over the last couple of weeks about food trucks, and in particular their location in our town center and Main Street zoning districts within the public right-of-way. And the issue would be is how many public parking spaces to take up if a use were to, or not a use, if a food truck were to locate there. So our proposal would be to add a statement in there that would limit any food truck to locating on 2 parking spaces. And I think one thing, Blair, that we'll need to add just to reiterate that it is public parking spaces. So we would clarify that in this statement as well, because they can also locate, as you see there on statement 4, that they can locate on private property with property owner's consent. So we want to make sure that it's clear that that is public parking spaces. And so I guess we feel, staff, that if there is a concern with how many spaces that food trucks could or maybe would take up in our public parking areas, we feel that this 2 parking space would would help that. And that would pertain whether it's parallel spaces or whether they are angled spaces. So just want to make that clear as well. So that would be the one staff recommended revision to the text based on the discussion. I know that some other board members have some thoughts and ideas. So I'll open up, I guess, the discussion for this for board members to get further thoughts and suggestions, recommendations.
Well, my only other concern besides parking spaces was just the amount of food trucks that would be allowed at one time. And so I see that we have a permitting requirement here, but there's nothing about amount of permits that are allowed, just to make sure that we don't have an overabundant amount of food trucks downtown. Is there a way, is anyone open to having a limit to permits, or a time frame for permits, just to control the amount of food trucks?
I mean, hey, this is Commissioner Hall. I can jump in real quick. From my perspective, if it's possible, I'd like to table this, because I need to get more information on for my own edification, to make an educated decision on what would be acceptable for the town.
If that's a route that the board would like to go, my recommendation would be is to just pull the language on the food trucks, that we could explore that separately as a separate zoning text amendment that we could add back into the code. So that way we could continue to move forward with the whole code, and not table the whole document just based on one small issue.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. We could even put a time boundary on it as well, say in the next 45, 60 days or whatever, that we'd come to an agreement on what this text amendment would be as it relates to
Jeff, I would hope that we would probably get this done before 45 to 60 days. We should probably all just give our comments now, and if further discussion is needed, then we can table it. But I would suggest we try to do it sooner than later, especially if we're looking for the end of March to move in a particular direction.
I have a question. So in tabling this, even if we allow ourselves an additional time to review just the food truck portion of the ordinance, that still gives us time as an amended item to include that back in the document, even if that document, we decide to move forward with the LDC at the end of March in our next meeting, then this can still be added as an amended item. Am I correct, Jeff?
I would think so. Maybe I could defer to our attorney just to be 100% sure, but I would think we would be able to add in the revised section based on any input that we receive over in discussion over the next couple of weeks.
If I could chime in, I think the better part of discretion would be, since this is the public hearing night and not decision night, any tabling should occur on the night of the decision night and not this evening. And you may be find that you're able to, any commissioner may be able to find some sort of comfort zone between now and the decision night, and you may necessarily have to defer any part of it, but it would be better to deal with it on decision night rather than on public hearing night.
Okay, so then maybe the better thing to do then tonight is just get a couple of the points from the board that you would like us to look into and further develop that we could look to make revisions to this and bring back on decision night. Does that sound appropriate, Charlie?
Well, that sounds appropriate to me, but that's just me. But I think that would be the better part of discretion because you still have the public comment period open through tomorrow. And so rather than interfering with the public comment section, I think it would be better just to have the discussions tonight and those items that the board can resolve in their discussions on the questions that you have in terms of this entire document. Just let that move forward. And then on the decision night, if there are portions of it, you can then defer adoption of those sections pending a later date.
Okay, that sounds good. So it sounds like based on Tracy, that Tracy would like to look at the possibility of a limitation on number that could locate in downtown at one time.
Well, I'm looking at C on here, and so it looks like food trucks have to apply for a permit for a specific location. So how do we control who takes that specific location if we have multiple food trucks with those permits? So I feel like we need to come up with some type of system for who occupies which space and for when. I don't know how does anybody know how any other municipalities handle this, or am I making it way too complicated?
Well, believe it or not,
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Brenda. Believe it or not, this is still very new and novel stuff with food trucks. There is not a whole lot of guidance out there, quite frankly. So, I do think what we have addresses a lot of things in a good manner. But, there's certainly always room for improvement if you still have some concerns on your mind, which is, why we're doing this process. The hard part I would say to figure is what is the right number, but you could say that with a lot of different regulations as well. Right now with very little regulation, it's not been much of an issue. I mean, we have one area where one is regularly located on the east side of downtown on the right of way. And then we have a couple of other areas where they're located on private property. And then we have some other areas outside of downtown where they regularly are on a somewhat consistent basis, though not quite as much here in the last year because of COVID. And I guess that's just because business has been a little bit tougher, I would guess. That's, as far as that's concerned, I mean, it's not, they're here, I guess you could say. They're not here in what I would call in an overabundance. That doesn't mean that they might not be at some point, certainly could have more, and certainly understand that there is a sensitivity there sometimes with our other restaurant owners. And, some, are more welcoming of that than others for obvious business reasons there. But, we're certainly open to any and all thoughts from the board about how to rectify any concerns. I just brainstorming, thinking about downtown. If you wanted to throw a number on the amount that could locate downtown at any one time outside of a special event or something like that, 5. I mean, that just sounds like a reasonable number to throw out there. If the board would think that's.
Well, let's just think about the fact that if we're allowing each food truck to take up 2 parking spaces and you had 5 trucks, that's 10 parking spaces taken up from downtown, and then taking up parking spaces for our brick and mortar stores customers. And so I just, like, I was thinking more like 3, but I mean, I don't know what anybody else is thinking Yeah, I'm certainly open to input from anyone.
So if I can add to the whole conversation, I'm going to start off with number 2. In the right of way, if we have a 50-foot minimum between trucks, we're now going to have food trucks spread out over a much larger area than they probably need to be. I would probably say that might need to be changed, or at least for us to consider it, instead of 50 feet, perhaps 30 feet. The reason being is that if you have them spread out 50 feet, people are going to try to park in between those food trucks, and then you're going to have just a lot of people walking around and trying to park while a food truck's conducting its business. So it might not be a bad idea to try to corral them a little bit better. I understand the concern with parking, but if we manage it a little bit better, I think it's going to be a lot safer, and it's going to be a little bit more enjoyable. Moving on to number 3, a maximum of 2 parking spaces. 2 things to consider. I would say it should probably be 3 parking spaces, and the reason for that is some of these food trucks have equipment on the front of their vehicles or the rear of their vehicles, making them a little bit longer than the 2 parking spots. Also, again, if it's only 2 parking spots, you're going to have vehicles, and some of these are bigger trucks, parking on either side, which again makes it a little bit awkward for that particular truck to try to conduct its business, and also for pedestrians to get out and also be a part of that mix. So maybe 1 more parking spot would give them just enough room where they can set up generators or whatever they need, just equipment. As far as limiting the overall number of food trucks, for the most part, these food trucks come for special events. So I don't know if we really need to limit that. I mean, I don't know that we're going to have 10, 20 food trucks show up, but as far as that goes, and as far as the right of way, I think that a number of either 3 or 4 would probably be appropriate, because again, I don't see very many of them coming. I know that when we have certain events down by one of the businesses downtown, we've had 2 or 3, and that really hasn't been an issue. And if this ever needs to be revisited, it can be amended, but we could start off small and then see if it works for us. And we can either roll it back or just leave it as is.
And that is a good point Pedro makes. I mean, keep in mind, anything that is adopted this evening, and not just for this particular requirement, for anything, there's always the opportunity to go back through a zoning text amendment to change that requirement at any time, and it can be initiated by the board.
I think we had Mayor Pro Tem wanting to make a comment.
I was just following up to something Commissioner Westlook had stated with regard to the food trucks. And it was regarding the parking spaces. And then also, I think, Tracy, that when we spoke about this before on the board, that it was a first come, first served basis with the permit, and allowing those who come in first to get the permits for the spaces. When you were asking how we decide who gets it, I think that's something that we did discuss at that time. So I'm not sure about the 3 space allocation as opposed to the 2 parking spaces with the trucks, because now 3 spaces is really taking up a lot of parking. And then, even though this document can be amended, we also need to think long-term too with it as to the number of trucks, because once our downtown park is open and you start having events and, summer is there and programs, you will get a lot more trucks coming out, for food, for ice cream, for all kinds of things to service people who are out and about during those summer days as well. So just a consideration. One final point I do want to make. The food trucks on private property, knowing that they are private property and we can't really regulate that. There's a food truck that is already on private property where the old Bojangles was. What is there to say that the owner of that property would not just allow 10 food trucks to be on that property? What happens then?
That is covered here in section A, food trucks in that particular scenario. Here where our corridor commercial zoning is, they'd be permitted only on private property. Number one, with the property owner's consent. Must have a minimum of 10 parking spaces to locate there. So that idea, as we saw here, just right next door to Town Hall, there were people that were pulling off of 16 to park to access that food truck. So that covers that. If any additional food truck wanted to locate there, they'd have to have a minimum of 5 more parking spaces. And then statement number 4 there, that no more than 3 food trucks can locate on a parcel at one time. So that would cover that number. And then of course, meeting all required setbacks and then removal of trash. So that would cover that one.
Right, just wanted that for clarification. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to weigh in on this a little bit too. I mean, this is new ground. And these, the food trucks are relatively new, as you said earlier, Jeff. And we're creating something right now that you bet we're going to, find ourselves in a position or required to modify it along the way. I think that, again, we've got a really good start on what we have here. And I don't want to see us get too hung up on the details of it and prevent anything from moving forward on the LDC. Again, what we have here right now is, again, you got to Pedro's comment about the parking. You got to decide whether it's parking in tandem or parking, side by side, angled versus 90-degree parking. So there's a few comments to be worked out, but I think all of us have had good comments and thoughts about where we're going. I think we can, again, get enough information to the staff to have this in final form by our next meeting. I would encourage all of you then to submit any comments and then we'll work it through on the next 2x2.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. We've got a 2x2 coming up between now and the next meeting, so we can do that as well.
Jeff, I'm comfortable with having the maximum of 2 spaces for each food truck. I like that addition so that they can't be spread out and it's kind of confined to a particular area or won't be taking up very much parking. I do maybe like to revisit number 2, just where if you wanted some food trucks to cluster instead of taking up as much space, I think that could be maybe revisited. But overall, I think because this is a living, working document and I'm fine to put it out there and then we just revisit it and assess what this does for us and then maybe make adjustments as needed, because as this is new territory, we're going to need to see how this functions and then make adjustments as we move forward. So, I think this is a good starting place. And then, I know that it's a delicate balance between brick and mortar and food trucks. And I think that that's some of the concern too. And I think we need to just kind of test it and see where all this lands. I think food trucks won't come if they don't have customers. So the thought of, being overrun with food trucks may not necessarily come to fruition. I know they are popular, but again, if they don't have the business and the people to patronize them, then they're not going to, come here and do that. So, I know we can always think in both extremes, but I think it'd be good to just kind of maybe see how this works.
Okay, well, I think I've got enough direction to make a couple of little tweaks, and we can add it to your already, just a heads up, a little bit lengthy 2x2 subject matter next week, but that's okay. We can add this in just to hash it out in time before final decision day, and we'll be happy to do that. So then next, we have trim lights. So here I'll scroll back up here again to, this is found in section 8.15.3 lighting standards. And so the issue brought up was trim lights, and that would be typically neon or LED type lighting that follows the architectural feature of a building, like you see out well in downtown, as an example that we have now on North and South Main Street, as well as one or two commercial buildings along the corridor, and also what you're seeing more and more of in residential areas as well. So in particular, Millbridge, my neighborhood, there's probably at least a dozen or so homes that have those professionally installed now, and more and more by the week. So I'm sure they're also out and about in other people's neighborhoods as well. So lighting is one of those things that the beauty is in the eye of the beholder, I guess is the best way to describe it. Some people really like the look. Some people, really don't. I mean, I can digress for a minute, tell a quick story. When I was very young in this biz, and I got a call from somebody that had mentioned they wanted a street light on their property in front of their house, and the nearest street light was over 600 feet away. And so I got tasked with researching that and solving that problem for somebody. And so we got the street light there, and I thought, I was doing great. I would just been at my job for a few months. I really solved the problem. I felt good about it. And then within 3 or 4 days after that, I got a call from one of the neighboring property owners complaining about that light there, and there was too much light now in that cul-de-sac. So, it's just one of those things where sometimes you have, just two very different sides of the opinion on what is good for light and what is not. So the trim light stuff is kind of not too different from food trucks, in that it's becoming more and more popular as we see. And I know that commercial businesses, they like more than anything to be seen and noticed. And so I would think that not a whole lot of them would choose to do that, but I think some will, because it is expensive to put them in professionally. But one of the things that we added, just to reiterate here, the point at the end was that it should not flash, pulsate, move, or scroll, just to make sure that that is reiterated in other parts of the code, but also wanted to put it right here at the bottom of this, so that if it was kept in as it is now, which would be that they would be allowed at the discretion of the zoning administrator to outline individual windows, roof lines, or buildings, that we would also reiterate that they would not flash, pulsate, move, or scroll. So that's how we've left it for board discussion on any other thoughts or comments on that. And just as a reminder, that we do have these in downtown, and they're not the Charlotte Trim Light or Trim Light Company. They're ones that have been installed over time throughout downtown by some different folks. But just a reminder of that as well. So what is the board's thoughts on this issue?
Well, I'll just speak up first, since I'm the one who brought this issue up. My concern is that if we start having every commercial building with trim lights in different colors, neon lights, that we're going to end up looking like the Las Vegas Strip, basically, that we're going to have lots of different color bright lights all down Providence Road. And to me, that doesn't fit with the small town charm look that we're going for. And so my suggestion would be to just require that they all be white lights or clear lights, however you say it, just so that there's consistency as you're driving down Providence Road with those lights. I love the lights downtown, the clear lights, I think they're great. But I just think seeing a lot of, if each building has a different color light, it then starts to look tacky, in my opinion. So anyone else have an opinion on that?
I agree with Commissioner Westlake.
I too agree. I like the clear lights without it being red, yellow, pink, purple, green, all the other colors.
I would suggest if we go that direction that we would make it clear that that's for commercial buildings and not residential.
Yes,
Right.
that's my opinion.
Yes.
I think the goal here is for the uniformity as you're driving down Providence and commercial areas.
I agree. There is one caveat though, is if we have a town event or we want to celebrate something like Breast Cancer Awareness Month or light up the town pink, or if we want to do blue in recognition of, the police department, that I don't know how we could allow those type of exceptions, or if that would be something we would plan as an event from the town. But I think if we wanted to do something like that, or some sort of exclusion around holiday time or something like that.
We can specify that. I mean, that can be one of the revisions, that it would be allowed for special events or things like that. Happy to include that.
How does that work, Jeff? Is it some type of app that they can just switch colors, or do they actually physically have to switch light bulbs? Do you know?
Well, for the trim light company, it's actually programmed through your phone, believe it or not. And they, amazingly, you can have up to, so they say, over 1 million different color schemes. It's quite amazing. I actually had the gentleman come to my house to look at it just for our back patio. And it's really cool, and they are a very professional product. What we have downtown is a bit different from that. I mean, it still works, but I would think that we might, and we actually have it programmed in our CIP that we'll be discussing more at budget time, that we would consider it as part of our 5-year plan to actually have a professional installation of those type lights in our downtown, as opposed to what we have now. So I think staff could live with white in commercial. If that is the pleasure of the board, we can go ahead and make that revision for the code.
I mean, that's fine with me, and I agree. Ian mentioned about events. If you want to add anything on there, I don't know how that would work. Would the town just say in celebration of whatever, you can change it to this color? Is that how this would work, or what do you suggest on that?
Well, also along that line, not everyone is going to have that ability. Say like the lights that we have existing downtown, they haven't been changed out yet. So I think that's probably something left to later discussion, if we ever feel that we're to a point where everybody's on the same system, so to speak. So maybe we leave that off the table, but I think you're all right in kind of looking towards a consistency element of it all, that clear, white, whatever you want to describe it at. I think that would be at least the starting point of what we might know as a new normal.
Okay, great. Well, that one sounds like it's settled. That's fantastic. We'll make that revision. And so last but not least, any other thoughts, things that the board would like us to revisit now, or I guess in the next 2 weeks before March 23rd. Any other thoughts? I do want to make another point here, and I know this was just an amazing participation level of the board in general, as I think I've mentioned to you on several occasions that there are some of my colleagues out there that thought that we were nuts going through reading every single page of every chapter and going through it that way. But you know what? It really, I think, made the process better. It's made you as a board more invested in the code and more understanding of the code. And so it was well worth it, in my opinion, to be as thorough as we did. I don't remember how many work sessions we had. I think it was 8, maybe 9. That's a lot for an elected body to go through a document like this, but I think it was well worth it.
I do too. I commend all of you for, I don't want to say putting up with it, but for investing your time and effort on behalf of the town to make sure that we got a look at this. And I'm not sure that was necessarily done before. So, kudos and congratulations to all of you for going through the process with the town manager and all of his staff. So we've accomplished a great deal. So I thank you for that. Jeff, I don't want to forget, and Melody, I know you're unmuted here. I know we have another couple of pieces to fit in here. So Jeff, if you're complete with your presentation and your team, I think Melody is, because we're virtual, has to read into the record a couple of the comments. So are we ready for that, Melody?
You sure are.
Very good. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So we received 2 different public comments related to the LDC public hearing. The first is from Sheila Simpson. She lives at 9512 Simpson Road, Waxhaw. It's related to zoning change. She requested that her property be located, which is located at 708 North Providence Street, parcel 05112-078, be a part of the NC Neighborhood Center zoning map as proposed, as opposed to becoming R4. So then the second comment was submitted by Neil Gimmon, who lives at 1201 Beckford Glen Drive in Waxhaw. It was related to food trucks. The comment is, I'm glad to see that there has been research and homework done for zoning a food truck and publicly done, not like what past commissioners had tried to do. To give you all a bit of history, all food trucks at our brewery are inspected by Union County Health Department. We have had a member inspect them outside of our brewery. In order to get your inspection cleared, a food truck must have a clean kitchen where food is prepared. Hold on, I have to maximize this. It's pretty small. That is a regulation by the state. For clarity's sake, I would suggest that you break out Section C, as it contains a lot of details. As for the administrative permit, are there details on this yet? When I was the chairman of the Main Street Advisory Board, we made several suggestions that are included in the language, which I am glad to see. If there are any questions concerning food trucks, I invite all of you to come to the brewery to talk with the food truck owners. Most of the owners are Waxhaw residents. And that is the end of that comment. I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor.
Very good. Thanks for that. Well, I guess at this point, we're at a point of making a recommended action, actually a motion to close this public hearing. So if we are ready to, I'll look for a motion to close this public hearing.
Mayor, can I add one thing real quick in response to that public comment on the requested zoning change? Let's see if I can pull that up here. Let you look at that. here. There we go. So I tried to zoom in to the area a little bit better. So after receiving that public comment late this afternoon, the parcel in question is this long rectangular parcel right here. It has frontage on North Providence, as well as quite a bit of frontage on Blythe Mill, and then a little bit on Miller Drive. It encompasses that entire block between North Providence and Miller Drive along Blythe Mill. Yeah, I would throw out there that I would be fine on the planning staff side of that being changed to neighborhood center. I don't think that's an unreasonable request there in that location based on what's around there. So I just wanted to throw that out to the board.
My only concern on that would be the neighbor next to them. So then if that ended up being businesses there, now this neighbor, the side of their yards could be looking at the back of businesses. So I would at least want to discuss with that neighbor their thoughts on it.
Mayor Pro Tem, you had a comment? Okay. As you can see on the map there, we do have some adjustments that you remember. All of that was under the former, or what is soon to be former UN. And so all the way up there, we've got, looks like we have 2 parcels to the west of that parcel over there, and then all of the parcels to the north of it, which seems like this parcel, because of its length, would eventually front onto Blythe Mill there. I don't know that it would be, I'd probably, looking at it right now, I don't know that it'd necessarily be unreasonable to have the different zoning there if we have the appropriate buffers between the 2 zones. So again, just, you look at the 2 parcels there, the parcels across the street, it would actually complete a corridor of that zone, which you see in the dark brown. So anyway, that's my comment on it.
Anybody else?
Jeff, I know this isn't necessarily specific to that particular parcel, but on the west side of North Providence there, why do we have like those 3 parcels? It just seems, why those delineated from all of that? It just seems kind of odd that we wouldn't use the street boundaries to delineate the zoning there.
Well, that's very perceptive and a good question, and that's originally how it was. But you may recall that we had a specific, I would call it neighborhood charrette with folks from that neighborhood. And so that's where this was a result of. However, that particular property owner up here, the very north parcel here, was not part of that neighborhood charrette at the time. But the ones that were specifically requested this zoning for those parcels, and that's why this one house here is that way as well, and we acquiesce to their desires there.
All right, well, let's take that under advisement there, Jeff, and kind of make the decision on, I guess you can do some more research on it. Again, I don't know necessarily that, I look at what Commissioner Simpson was referring to as well, and I know who those property owners are, and I think I understand that even their uses right now are single family detached, that their request was for R4. So I think we need to start to look at that a little bit more. So why don't we take a look at it and come back to it on or before the next meeting, or certainly address it in the 2x2. One more thing for the 2x2.
Well, we can do a little bit research between those two there, and then we'll let you know what the result of that is.
Okay, all right, thanks for that. I'm going to look at for hands. Any other comments, thoughts before we make a motion to close this public hearing? Anybody, any hands up? Very good. All right, now I'm looking for the motion to close this public hearing. Do I have a motion? All right, we have the motion to close the public hearing from Commissioner Maury. We're going to do a roll call vote around the horn here. We'll go Commissioner Westlick.
Commissioner Westlick, aye.
Commissioner Hall.
Commissioner Hall, aye.
Commissioner Simpson.
Commissioner Simpson, aye.
Commissioner Morey.
Commissioner Morey, aye.
Mayor Pro Tem McMillan.
Brenda McMillan, aye.
Very good. Thank you, guys. Good discussion all the way around. I really appreciate that. All right, we're going to move down to there's no old business, but there is some new business that moved down from the consent agenda, and it has to do with the minutes of the BOC meeting on the 26th of January, and I'm going to turn over the floor to the requester.
Great. After reviewing the meeting minutes, I think I would like to request the staff to go back and look at the Zoom meeting and to make sure that all the discussion points are accurate related to what was discussed in the Zoom meeting. So I feel like there was a few things that were missed on that meeting minute.
We are happy to do that.
We have consistency, what's on the Zoom record versus what's on the written record. Just have, it seems like a few things were omitted.
Absolutely, we're happy to do that.
Great. All right, I don't think we have to vote on that one. We just move it down or make a corrective action. Are we correct on that, Charlie?
That's correct.
All right, very good. All right, any other thoughts and comments on that particular item? I'll put it up before we move on. Did I see Jeff's hand up, or were you just waving?
I was waving at somebody, so.
You got to be careful when you do that here.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Not
a problem. All right, so as I understand, there are not any general public comments tonight, correct?
Correct.
Very good. We're going to move down to the town leadership reports, and we're going to go back to the person who waves.
Well, I apologize for talking a little bit longer. I've got 4 points to make this evening. With spring coming up, though, a lot of good events are around the corner. And first of all, I want to make the announcement that the town's spring cleanup week will be coming the first week of April. The specific dates this year will be April 6th, 7th, and 8th. And so that'll be like we've had in previous years. So that'll be items such as mattresses, white goods, furniture, televisions, general household items. You have those out at your place at the beginning of the week. Different trucks will come by at different times and pick up all those goodies that you want to get rid of. And of course, as always, there are certain things that will not be picked up, such as motors, batteries, oil, and paint, to name a few. Stay tuned to our social media and as well as website channels to when the flyers are produced here very soon about what is eligible to be picked up and what is not. And of course, as always, your trash and recycling and yard waste will be picked up on schedule that week as well. We've also can announce that we've added an event called a Shred It Day on April 10th. That is a Saturday, and it'll run from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Waxall Police Department. So if you've had a lot of hard copy papers that have been building up in your office or wherever, this is the opportunity for you to take it to the PD property here. We'll have a truck on site that will pick that stuff up and shred it for you. So it is a great opportunity for town residents to take advantage of this great service that we were able to procure. And lastly, also want to announce that the NCDOT's Spring Litter Sweep program is back for 2021. This is a biannual street cleanup drive, and the dates for that this year are April 10th through the 24th. This is a time where the NCDOT will provide supplies for street cleanups, including all gloves, safety vests, and bags. We were actually contacted just yesterday by our Representative David Willis. He's reached out to us and he's looking for all of the municipalities countywide to team up for a street cleanup event. And of course, we are more than happy to lead that charge, being that we just started developing this yesterday. Stay tuned for more information as we develop this over the next few weeks. But again, this is a biannual program that the NCDOT runs. So it's a great opportunity for the community to get out at large and just take some time, an hour or two, to clean up the debris that's on the roads. And it just so happens to coincide with Earth Day, is within that time period as well. And last but not least, just a reminder about our participation on Thursday at the county's workshop, and just remind the board that that location has changed from where it was originally scheduled. It is now going to be located at the salons at SPCC, and that's the Monroe campus. And so anybody that wants to ride together, our fleet will be humming about 7 a.m. in the morning here at Town Hall. If you want to ride, then that's when we will leave out heading down there. Otherwise, we'll see the rest of you either there getting there on your own, or if you are attending virtually. So that's all I have this evening. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for all those. Those are, we've got a lot of activity going on this spring, so it'll be pretty interesting to see everybody moving around the town outside. So that hopefully we can get by a few of the prior COVID issues. So that'll be great. All right, I'm going to turn it back over. I see Dina is back on screen with us this evening. So Dina, we'll give you time to say what you need to say.
Hello all again, and it's great still hanging out with y'all. I learned a lot too through that last presentation, so that's pretty awesome. So I'm going to give you a heads up on what's going on with Park and Rec and our upcoming programs and events. We are still in our program guide for to the end of March, and then a new one would come out in April. So just give you a heads up on that. And just a small disclaimer, we are changing over some of our photos or our images, and we're still getting some of those updated. And some of these images are still from our pre-COVID or some earlier on days. We are doing our fitness walks on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We've had up to 10 participants. I'm having a great time socializing, but also getting some exercise. The ladies, I wasn't able to put the new photo on here yet, but they all made specialized masks for their walking group. So it's so cute, but they're doing awesome. And then our next Fitness for seniors start up in April. So please, you have still time to sign up and go ahead and get that done. Our family programs and adult programs are full at this time. We're adding more in April and May. So stay tuned for more family programming with pottery and our charcuterie classes. The Hero Project is going strong. We are close to having 40 to 50 kids at each Wednesday. So just give you a heads up of tomorrow, we're having the Charlotte Rescue, Dog Rescue, joining us at Town Creek to have some puppy love on tomorrow at 2:30. And then we are skipping St. Patrick's Day and then coming back on the 24th with another Town Creek event with scoop ball. So the kids, to keep them active. This Friday is our first movie night of the year. We are actually full at this time, but you're more than happy to get on the waiting list. But we are excited to start off our spring season with HOP. Save the date for April. We're watching Wonder Woman. We, of course, are trying to meet all different types of age groups and with our movie night. So please join us. And that's a partnership at Waxall Elementary. So please come out. Update on the downtown park. So we are getting the survey done, finishing up this week, the soil sampling, finishing up all of our PARDIF applications with all those documentations. The team has been awesome, helping out with a lot of technical with the maps and helping with getting all of our just our documents in one place. I really appreciate that a lot. So we're finally getting some steam under the sponsor space. I would like to just do a shout out to all the wonderful participants that are come forward and say we have a couple more spaces available, but we have Reinhardt Realty has decided to adopt the Duncan McDonald House and its grounds. So they will be starting off spring cleanup and all the sprucing up around the McDonald House in the next month. And we just got Town Creek and Dare Still Gardens this week with participants wanting to adopt that space. So extremely excited and really appreciate the community spirit coming out and helping us with all these wonderful spaces. And as always, we love partnering. So that's with our local businesses, artists, business, our artisans, different farmers, our gardeners. We actually met with the Union County Gardeners, Master Gardeners this week about some projects too. So it's one of those, we want to partner with you. And what a wonderful way to give back to your community is to be, kind of in it with us. So again, we're looking for wonderful partners to come and enjoy our community and make a sense of community for our citizens. The Butterfly Project, we're still looking for that special person or group that would like to do artwork on the butterfly. So if you are interested, it could be from a Girl Scout troop to a women's group to just a family group that wants to kind of put their stamp on Waxhaw. So we would love for you to be a part of that program. Again, we are following all protocols with our programs and with events, and we're still in a modified phase 3, and we will continue to do that. Take all directions from our governor on what steps to take for COVID. Leave you with our mission and vision. as always. And if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer those.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I too am still excited about moving forward on the park project and get that going. You've been busy keeping everybody happy and active in the park system. I see more and more activity out there every weekend, every day when I'm out traveling around. So, you know, they're loving the sunshine in the last couple of days, so that's a good thing. And it really does feel like spring is here, so we'll see what that all brings to us. So any other questions for Parks and Rec Director around the board? Very good, they're quiet. So, all right, thank you again, Dina. Appreciate that and everything that you do. We'll move down next to any comments, any brave comments from the Board of Commissioners while we're trying to end this long meeting, but any comments, any additional reports from anybody? Very good, seeing none, I'm gonna let us jump to a motion from somebody to adjourn this meeting. There's nothing on the closed session, so we can move to that. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
So moved. So we're gonna go around the horn. Commissioner Westlake, we have a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Commissioner Westlake, aye.
Commissioner Hall,
Commissioner Hall, aye.
Commissioner Morey,
Commissioner Moore, aye.
Commissioner Simpson,
Commissioner Simpson, aye.
Mayor Pro Tem McMillan.
Brenda McMillan, aye.
All right, thanks everyone for being active and participating all along the things that we've been doing over the past several months. And again, thank you to the town manager and his staff and all the presenters over there for bringing this to us. I agree, Jeff, this is probably something that has not been done because they might not have been as brave or as prepared as we are to go through these things line item by line item. So we really appreciate your efforts and everybody who has helped me contribute to that, including our town attorney, Charlie Buckley. So with that, we are adjourned all the way around. We'll see you in 2 weeks. So everybody have a great couple of weeks. See you later.
Be safe.
Good night.